Tonight, Port Alberni author Shelley reads from her futuristic novel Haven Hold. Scheduled to debut August 25th with Alberni Valley publisher RCN Media, Penner is also the author of a short work of fiction entitled A Kind of Seeing, which also debuts August 25th with RCN Media. Penner has always been a creator in many disciplines, drawing, painting, and photography, as well as writing. Quote, I have always had a head full of stories. As a child, I would put myself to sleep by living scenes in my imagination until I dozed off. I didn't just make up stories, I became a part of them. I felt all the emotional nuances of the characters. Eventually, my head became so full of those imaginary people, demanding their chance to be made real in words, that I just had to start writing. Now, welcome us into your delightful world, Shelley, as we welcome you to our stage.
Thank you. Well, this is my book. Oh, I think my camera's making it look backwards, but that's what it looks like. I'm going to read chapter 1 today, which is a very short chapter, fairly short. This takes place after the apocalypse, and the prologue actually explains how the apocalypse comes about, but I'm not going to read that part. I'm going to start with chapter 1. The lone traveler drew his cloak tighter as wind whipped a gust of rain along the open track. Spruce forest loomed on either side, lashing and ominous. Twilight spread beneath the brush of storm clouds to wash the world with a dull stain. Gradually, the layers of night built to a density so opaque the traveler could no longer see. But he dared not stop. This late in the year, at this elevation, rain could easily turn to snow and trap him in the pass. He felt sure his destination could not lie more than a few more miles ahead. He strained his eyes for a glimpse of lamplit windows. Normally, the dark generated no fear in him, nor did he usually fall prey to imaginings. But this storm seemed consciously malevolent. Needles of wind-driven rain penetrated his cloak and soaked him to the skin. Lightning strobed the night, etched the world in purest black and white. In that brief flash, he realized he had wandered off the trail. Thunder growled so deep he felt the vibration in his diaphragm. He looked back, and an amputated tree limb slapped him wetly across the face. He turned forward again, lashed onward by the storm. For hours, he stumbled over roots and tripped over deadfalls until, covered with dirt and rotting leaves, he felt bruised and chilled to the bone. At last, he caught a distant glimmer of firelight beckoning invitingly through the trees. He hurried toward it thankfully, anticipating the hospitality of the hold, the warmth of a dry bed, a meal, and companionship. A branch cracked loudly under his foot, and abruptly something tightened around his ankle and snatched his feet from under him, hoisting him into the air. He screamed, more from startlement than pain or fear. Swinging in the upside-down, chaotic darkness, he struggled like a drowning man, not sure which way was up. His pack slid off and landed with a thud. He could only hope nothing had broken, but at least it helped to orient him. He had triggered a snare, he realized, one intended for much larger game than rabbits. His belt knife sliced through the braided rawhide, and he dropped heavily, sprawled half atop his pack, adding a few new bruises to his collection. As he climbed to his feet, lightning briefly illuminated the night, imprinting on his retinas the image of a tall, menacing figure with drawn bow, arrow aimed straight for his heart. He dropped the pack and knife and cried, "Peace, I mean no harm." "Who are you?" Those quiet words seemed to float disembodied on the wind, coming from no fixed direction. Name's Curdy. I'm a traitor. A long, tense moment passed, during which Curdy wondered how many surrounded him. This was definitely not a standard Holder reception. Mutants lived in these mountains too, many with good reason to hate normals like himself. The life of a solitary trader presented many hazards, and Curdy knew of several men who had died gruesomely at the hands of mutant raiders. His heart felt like a wild animal trying to pound its way out of the cage of his ribs. He clenched his jaw to keep his teeth from chattering. I got lost in the storm, headed for Macy's Hold. I would really appreciate a hot meal and a dry corner to sleep in. The night thrummed silently with unspoken distrust, like a subsonic vibration. Hospitality seemed an increasingly unlikely possibility, and Curdy began to think he might feel lucky to escape with his life and his goods intact. Fingers abruptly clamped onto his shoulder from behind. Walk. My pack, Curdy protested. I have it. This seemed not a good thing, but Curdy moved without resistance as the hand and an occasional terse word directed him through the trees in a circuitous route that apparently avoided more traps. Dim firelight flickered behind hide-covered windows as they approached a rough-hewn log cabin. His captor reached past him to open the door. Curdy stumbled in and went to his knees in front of the fire, holding chilled fingers toward the warmth gratefully. A half-empty pot of stew sat on the hearth, and the smell made Curdy's mouth water and his stomach cramp with hunger. His pack landed beside him with a thump that made him wince. His host stepped back into the shadows before Curdy could get more than a brief impression of broad shoulders, a hard young face, high cheekbones, and a mane of dark hair. Help yourself to food. It should still be warm. Thanks. Curdy wasted no time accepting the invitation, soon scraped the last mouthful from the bottom of the pot. With a sigh of repletion, he sat back a little and let a belch roll out of him. I sincerely appreciate your hospitality, he said. May I know the name of my host? Daniel. Ah, a good Armageddonist name. The Armageddonist cult had started 1,000 generations earlier out of a grim determination to annihilate all mutants in order to preserve the purity of the human race. Are you an Armageddonist? No. The flatness of the reply left no room for further inquiry. Are your friends not coming in out of the storm? It's not a fit night to wander. A quick glance around had already informed Curdy that the cabin housed only one, but he still felt unconvinced that Daniel had remained alone out there. Crouched in a shadowed corner near the door, his host turned to study him. A chill shivered down Curdy's spine as the firelight caught in Daniel's eyes, reflecting a flat, cold light, like the eyes of a wolf just beyond the campfire. Mutant. My friends prefer the storm to company, Daniel replied with a certain wry amusement. The mutant rose from his crouch in a smooth, graceful moment. Bed down wherever you wish, he said, then stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Curdy slept lightly, rolled in a blanket before the fire, but Daniel never returned. The storm blew itself out sometime after midnight, and morning dawned clear and crisp. Curdy made a trip to the nearby creek to wash up and relieve himself, then returned to the cabin. With sunlight shafting in through the open door and washing the interior with a warm glow, he had enough light to do a quick inventory of the mutants' belongings. Most looked crudely functional, obviously made by Daniel himself, with some skill but no embellishment. In one corner, Curdy found a stack of hides and furs, beautifully tanned to soft suppleness. He held up a luxuriant snowcat pelt, admiring it when a shadow suddenly darkened the doorway. Daniel entered and stood staring at Curdy, his eyes strangely animal-like. By daylight, he looked both more and less intimidating. More because the muscular strength of his body became clearly apparent. less because his tense, guarded expression hinted at hidden vulnerability. What are you doing? Sorry, Curdy apologized quickly, replacing the furs. I'm a trader. I just wanted to assess what you might have worth bartering for. You have some lovely pelts here. Daniel studied him narrowly. You would trade with a mutant? I'll trade with any honest man who has something to offer. Daniel appeared to consider the idea. I doubt you have anything I need. Perhaps not, Curdy smiled, but I may have something you will want. He opened his pack and began laying out his wares for inspection. Ribbons, lace, sewing needles, knives, axe heads, fish hooks, combs and cutlery, mirrors, one cracked after last night's misadventure, soap, candles, jewelry, several lengths of fine fabric, thread in a variety of colors, a handful of pre-Armageddon artifacts whose purpose remained a mystery, a pair of small handguns but no ammunition, a belt made of seashells, 3 small stone carvings of animals, several lengths of rope, and a single mouth harp, obviously well used by someone. The mutant studied the array with little enthusiasm. He picked up an iron axe head and felt its edge, then put it back, fingered the jewelry curiously, sniffed the soap, and played a run of notes on the mouth harp. Have I nothing you want? Curdy asked, disappointed. He had picked out 5 of the best furs and set them aside hopefully. Daniel hesitated, studying him with a frown. Your cloak. A tightly woven garment of thick, warm wool dyed a dull gray-brown, it had comforted Curdy through numerous adventures. The sun is warm, and the hold lies less than a day's walk away. I'm sure you could trade for another there. All right, Curdy nodded, eyeing the coveted furs. But since this cloak is the only thing between me and the weather, I'll have to make you pay dearly. I'll want these 5 pelts in exchange. Fine, the mutant shrugged indifferently. Curdy almost chortled aloud at the ease of it. He could buy a dozen cloaks for the value those furs would bring. He repacked his wares and at the last minute offered Daniel an iron axe head in exchange for a hide in which to bundle the furs. Daniel guided Curdy back to the trail and gave him directions to the hold. Curdy thanked him again for the food and shelter. As he started off again, the mutant called after him, "The holders don't know I live up here. I prefer it stays that way." Curdy waved in acknowledgement and trudged on, plans to return already forming. The mountain reverberated with the thunder of hoofbeats as 24 armed and mounted holders cantered up the rocky trail. Like an avenging army, they swept into the clearing and swirled around the cabin in confusion, searching for enemies to shoot. One young holder leaped off his horse and ran to the door. Without even trying the latch, he kicked the door in, while a companion covered the opening with a rifle. But no mutants leaped out or cowered within. The young man quickly ransacked the single room. There ain't no plunder here, just a pile of furs he probably trapped himself. The holder gave Curdy a suspicious glare. What makes you so sure he's a raider? Shut up, Gilly, one of the older men snapped. Who gives a shit if he's a raider? The only good mutant is a dead one. He implied he had friends, said Curdy, but he obviously lives here alone. There may be a raider village nearby. The holders rifled through Daniel's possessions greedily, confiscating anything of use or interest. Then they set fire to what remained. Sparks and smoke swirled skyward, filling the crisp mountain air with the acrid scent of destruction. A crow flew down to land in a tree at the edge of the clearing. It scolded them with a fury and agitation that seemed unnatural. Flames bit hungrily into the peeled logs, and the holders shouted and laughed triumphantly as they sorted through the pile of belongings they had looted. Flames swept over the porch now, and suddenly a half-grown fox cub darted from beneath it, more terrified of the approaching fire than of the men who had set it. With a shout, Curdy drew his handgun, and aimed carefully at the small, rusty blur, then fired. The young fox sprawled, yelping in agony as it rolled on the ground and tried to drag itself to the safety of the trees. Curdy stalked over to the terrified little creature and stood over it, grinning as he pulled the trigger. The fox cub jerked and then lay still. "You didn't need to do that," Gilly scowled. "Don't you get it?" Curdy laughed. He whirled to aim at the frantic crow. "These are his friends, varmints just like him." His shot clipped the branch, and the crow retreated in a flurry of feathers, disappearing into the forest. Curdy swore. "Damn mutant is half animal himself with those eyes. He's a handsome devil, though. Bring a mighty nice price on the slave market. Any of you ground holders want to help me hunt him down?" "Nah, we got work waiting back home. We just didn't want no raiders squatting in our backyard. Reckon this will send a clear enough message. You can take Ferris if he's willing. He's our best tracker." Ferris nodded his agreement, and his brother Gilly unexpectedly volunteered as well, eyeing Curdy with thoughtful suspicion. In the concealing shadows amongst the trees, a pair of wild mutant eyes watched the holders pack up their plunder and depart, leaving two of their number with Curdy, setting up camp in the clearing. This was not the first time Daniel had experienced betrayal, nor the first time he had been hunted and driven from his home. His life to this point consisted of years of social isolation and then one betrayal after another. He had known about the hold in the valley below, but the normal people, or Norps as most mutants called them, rarely ventured into these mountains, and Daniel had stayed well away from their territory. In the 2 years since he retreated to this remote mountain sanctuary, Curdy was his first human contact, and the results once more confirmed past experience. Daniel's heart felt like a stone in his chest, solid and leaden, except a stone could not hurt so much. He had loved that little fox. To Daniel, caution meant survival. He had long ago explored possible escape routes in case of attack, and he had prepared traps along those routes, most of which he could quickly set in passing. He emptied his emergency cache and headed deeper into the wilderness, traveling west and north through the roughest, rockiest terrain he could find. An expert at misdirection, he seldom left much sign. But a light snowfall on the second day of pursuit made hiding his passage virtually impossible. They pressed him hard for days, allowing him little time to rest. The tangled set of false trails he left should have confused any except the most expert of trackers, and the pitfalls he set, though not deadly, should have discouraged even the most determined slavers. Yet still they came on. The seventh day of pursuit dawned gray and dismal, threatening more snow. With every instinct and sign indicating the hunter still followed, Daniel resorted to more dangerous and drastic measures. Across the face of a sweeping incline of rocky alpine meadow, he left an artfully hidden trail that hopefully would draw his pursuers into the final trap without arousing suspicion. When he reached the safe concealment of the trees once more, he paused to cut a stout walking stick, then climbed to the ridge above the meadow, where he could overlook the trail. There he crouched behind a jumble of loose boulders, waiting patiently, the prey become the hunter. The shrouded sun reached its zenith and started to slip lower again before the hunters finally appeared, moving slowly out of the trees and across the slope of the meadow. The snares and pitfalls they had encountered over the past days had taught them caution and a profound respect for the ingenuity of the man they followed. Daniel watched narrowly as they traversed the slope below him, noting with satisfaction that Curdy moved with a painful limp. The traitor must have fallen afoul of one of the spring snares or trip lines that guarded Daniel's back trail. Directly below the mutant's vantage point lay a shallow cave, and Daniel waited tensely until his trail led the hunters to its mouth, where his tracks abruptly disappeared entirely. He listened as they argued, the holders wanting to give up and turn back, and Curdy stubbornly trying to convince them that the rewards would be worth the trouble once they captured the mutant. And that's all for today. You have to buy the book if you want to read the rest. Thank you.
Great.
Excellent. So, well, now, Shelley, it's the optional Q&A session if you would like one.
Sure.
Okay, so my first question is, how much for your book? Where is it available?
Well, the cover price is $25, $24.99, but the publisher says that it's on discount for $20.
All righty. So we just contact RCN Media's website or something?
That's right. I have it written down here. Actually, it's if you go to havenhold.net,
Okay.
then you can order it online from the RCN Media website.
Excellent.
And actually, for residents of Port Alberni, if you use the promo code free shipping, I believe that's all one word, free shipping, then you don't have to pay for shipping. And you get a free copy of my short story, A Kind of Seeing, bundled with your book.
Nice.
Yay! Woohoo! Nice.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Shelley.
Okay.
Is this going to be a series?
Yes, it is. This is actually I've been writing for 30 years, just mostly for my own pleasure. And this is actually the first book I ever wrote. But over 30 years, I have written 9 books in this same world, plus many others that are standalone stories.
Okay.
So this one, as the first book, I didn't know how many words it took to make a book when I started out. So I just kept writing until it was finished. And by that time I had over 1,000 handwritten pages. I didn't have a computer then, so they had to be handwritten. But it was too long to publish. So we've split it into a trilogy.
Okay.
And the sequel will be coming out in April. And the third one in the trilogy will be coming out the following April. And there are several more to follow.
And is this book appropriate for an 11-year-old? My nephew is looking for another series to read.
It can get pretty dark and violent at times, especially towards the third in the trilogy.
Okay.
I would say 14 and up, maybe.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was great. I enjoyed that.
Anybody else have another question?
Great work. I do.
There you go, Jackie.
Yeah, so great work. I put some information here in the chat if you want to check and make sure that it's okay there, Shelley, when you get a breather. But
Okay.
there's a link there for everybody that they can click on and go to and see that it's actually the top book on the site, I guess, the most recent launch or whatever. So you can order it from there, and there's a little bit more information there. So my question then is, how long did it take you? Would this particular volume have taken you? And then it's another question. Did you have somebody professional edit it? It's very nice. It's really great.
Thank you. The first draft took about a year, but over the 30 years since, I have read it every year or two and polished it and rewritten and edited. And every time I read it, I do sentence editing. Every time I read it, I see little errors that I have to correct. So it's been polished for a long time.
Nice. Did your publisher have somebody edit it for you also?
I had a copy editor. First we did a beta read where mock-ups of the book got sent out to, I believe it was 20 different people. and they gave their comments and I guess more or less proofread it. It seemed like everybody found different mistakes that I could fix. So, they gave me feedback so that I could correct anything that either didn't make sense or needed more work. And then it got sent to a copy editor who gave it a once over and gave me some pointers.
Nice. Great.
Good question. I have a question. Thank you for the reading. First of all, thank you for the reading. It's great to hear.
Thank you for your poems. I love the funny ones.
I wanted to ask you how you know so much about hunting and trapping.
I guess mostly from reading. I do a lot of reading.
Well, I thought maybe you live in Port Alberni and you do these things as well as write about them.
No, I would have to be starving to actually shoot an animal to eat.
Gotcha.
Don't give Anne any funny poems ideas. Any more questions?
And is this one of your first readings, your first public readings, Shelley?
My first reading for a group like this, I belong to a writers group, the Sunshine Club Writers. And we read for each other once a week. But it's the first time I've read this one publicly.
Yay!
Good job. Come back. Bring us some more installations. We'd love it. And you'll sell more books, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.